Hi class, welcome to section 6.7, Graphing Linear Equations. This section does tend to be a little bit longer, so feel free to pause and take a break. We are going to learn how to plot some points. We're going to learn how to graph linear equations from the plotted points. We're going to learn how to find some intercepts, how to calculate a slope, and also how to find the slope-intercept form of a line. Okay, first thing you need to do is become familiar with the coordinate system. There's going to be two axes. Your x-axis is the horizontal axis. Your y-axis is the vertical axis. And when you are given a point, you're going to be given two numbers, an x and a y, and that represents all the points that you see here in the grid where the gray lines cross each other. Dead center at point 0, 0 is called your origin, and sometimes they'll ask you about what quadrant your point lands in. When you do your quadrants, you're going to say them counterclockwise. So quadrant 1 is a quadrant where both x and y are positive, and then you're going to go counterclockwise to 2, down to 3, and then over to 4. When you need to plot a point, they're going to give you an ordered pair. So for example, if I gave you the ordered pair 5, 3, what I am describing to you is the location of the x and the location of the y. So if I wanted to plot this point, I would go on my x-axis to the right 5 spaces, because that is where your x is positive, and then I would go up 3 spaces to your y, and I would be located at that dot right there. So that would be in quadrant 1. So just to make sure you understand, I picked a couple more points, or a similar problem that involves a parallelogram. Okay, so the points A, B, and C are 3 vertices of a parallelogram with 2 sides parallel to the x-axis. Plot the 3 points below and determine the coordinates of the 4th vertex. Okay, so let's plot point A, which is located at 1, 2. So we'll need to go right 1 space and up 2 spaces. Plot B, which is located at 2, 4, so we'll go right 2 spaces and up 4 spaces. And we need to plot C, which is located at 7, 4. So we'll go right 7 spaces and up 4 spaces. Our goal is to find the 4th part of the parallelogram. Okay, so it's going to be in line with 2 on the y-axis, okay? And if you notice the relationship between the first point and the second point, it looks like they went up 2 spaces and right 1 space. So we're going to need to do the same thing to get from the top to the bottom. Okay, so to me, to make a parallelogram, it looks like we need to be located at the point 6, 2. And that will complete your parallelogram. Okay, often you're not just going to plot points, you're going to have to graph entire linear equations. The standard form of a linear equation is ax plus by equals c. Your a and your b have to be non-zero in order for it to be in this form. Anything that's in this form, when you graph it, is going to produce a straight line, and therefore it is called a linear equation. When you graph a line, you are only required to graph 2 points to create a line. Often we'll go ahead and we'll graph a 3rd point just to make sure that we stay linear. Once you have 3 points in a line, those will be called collinear. That means they're all in one line. In order to graph, there's a little bit of a process to start with. First thing we're going to do is we're going to rearrange the equations so that y is alone. Then we're going to pick several values for x and plug them into the equation to find their corresponding y values. We will plot these 3 values, and if we did everything right, they should form a straight line. If they don't form a straight line, go back, something's wrong. Okay, so for example, if I asked you to graph y equals 2x plus 2, and you're a beginner, the first thing you would do is make sure that your y is isolated. In this problem, y is already isolated, so we can go into picking our points. So typically you pick x values. You can pick any x value you want, but keep in mind you're going to have to graph the x value when you're done. So try to pick numbers that are easy to work with. I almost always pick the number 0 because it's really easy to substitute in. I like the number 1, and I like the number -1. Gives you an idea of what's going on every side of the equation. Now you have to find their corresponding y values, and to do that you take them one at a time and you substitute them into the equation 2x plus 2. Okay, so we'll need to substitute in our -1, our 0, and our 1. You're going to use order of operations, and this is going to tell you what the y value is equal to. So for your first one, you have 2 times -1, that's -2. -2 plus 2 is 0. So that means you have the point -1, 0 on your graph. So that is left one space, up no spaces. Next, you're going to substitute in your 0. 2 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 2 is 2. So you have the point 0, 2 on your graph. Left and right, none. Up, 2. Next, you're going to plug in the 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. You have the point 1, 4 on your graph. So right 1, up 4. And you have created a linear equation. Sometimes they're going to ask you to find specific things, such as intercepts. There's 2 different intercepts. You can find the x-intercept and you can find the y-intercept. The x-intercept is where you cross the x-axis. The y-intercept is where you cross the y-axis. In order to find the x-intercept, you're going to set the y equal to 0 in the equation, and you'll solve for an x value. In order to find the y-intercept, you set the x equal to 0, and you're solving the equation for y. So let's say I gave you the following problem. 3x plus 6y equals 12. I want you to find your x-intercept and your y-intercept. So let's start with the x. 3x plus 6y equals 12. In order to find the x-intercept, you need to set the y equal to 0. Okay, well, anything times 0 is 0. So it essentially just cancels out the y term completely, and it leaves you with 3x equals 12. And you can continue to solve for x by dividing both sides by 3, and your x-intercept is 4. So when you go to your graph, you're going to go to the x-axis, you're going to go right 4 spaces, and you're going to put a dot. You can also find your y-intercept. Let me just cover that up really quick. You can also find your y-intercept. 3x plus 6y equals 12 by setting your x equal to 0. Anything times 0 is 0, so that's going to zero out your x term, and it's going to leave you with 6y equals 12. And you can finish solving for y by dividing each side by 6. So your y-intercept is 2, so you can go over to your y-axis, you can go up to 2, and you can plot a dot. Simply draw a line between your 2 dots, and you've graphed your linear equation. Another way that we can graph is using slope. Okay, slope is how steep the line is, and slope should always be a numerical value when you go to calculate it. Okay, it's a fraction, and so when they use the word ratio, they're talking about a fraction. And the slope is represented by how much you change vertically divided by how much you change horizontally between 2 points on the graph. There's a couple of ways you can write it. You can say that it's the vertical change over the horizontal change. Some people just write that as delta x, y over delta x. Or there's a formula that you can use where you take the 2 y values and subtract them, you take the 2 x values and you subtract them, and then you reduce the fraction. So that is represented as m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. There's going to be 4 different kinds of slope that you can have. The first type of slope you can get is positive slope. So I always tell people pretend they're riding a scooter on their line from left to right. If you ride the scooter and the line appears to be increasing from left to right, then the slope will end up being some type of positive number. If you ride your scooter on the line from left to right and it appears that your scooter is going downhill, then when you calculate your slope, you should get a negative value. If your line looks like you're just riding on a flat line altogether, when you go to calculate your slope, you're going to end up with just a big old 0. Usually it'll be 0 divided by some random number, but that should be simplified to just be 0. The vertical line is the one that's the problem. If you try to ride your scooter on the vertical line, splat, you have a problem. You can't do it. Vertical lines have undefined slope. if you use the formula, typically you're going to get some number in the numerator and you're going to get a 0 in the denominator. And you are not allowed to divide by 0. So this is going to be called undefined. Okay, so get familiar with that word. It can happen. It only happens with vertical lines. Okay, so for example, I would like you to find the slope between the lines -1, -3, and 1, 5. Okay, so there's two ways you can do this. The first way you can do it is graphically. Okay, I don't know that this would be my first choice, but you could do it. Okay, so let's plot the point -1, -3. So we go left 1 and down 3. Okay, and then I could plot the point 1, 5. So I would go right 1 and up 5. And then I would look to see how much vertical change we have and how much horizontal change we had. Well, we went from a -3 to a +5, so that's a vertical change of 8. And we went from a -1 to a +1, so that's a horizontal change of 2. So if you did the vertical change over the horizontal change, your slope should come out to be 4. All right, sometimes people struggle visually to do this, so you could also use the formula. Remember the formula to calculate slope is y2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So in this situation, my y2 would be 5, my y1 would be -3, my x2 would be 1, and my x1 would be -1. And so I can just use my calculator to figure that out for me. 5 minus -3 is 8. 1 minus -1 is 2. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So it's up to you. You could graph it and count, or you could use the formula. I prefer the formula, but either way will get you the right answer. Okay, once you're able to find the slope, you can write what's called slope-intercept form of a line. The M represents the slope, the B represents the y-intercept, which is where you cross the y-axis. In order to graph equations in this form, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your y is all by itself. And then once you have the y by itself, you want to pick out the M, which is your slope, and the B, which is your y-intercept. Once you have those picked out, you are then going to plot the y-intercept on the y-axis. This is going to be the first dot that goes on your line. You're going to get a second dot on your line by using the slope, which is the rise over the run, or the vertical change over the horizontal change. Once you have 2 points on the graph, draw a line through the points and you have graphed the equation. So for example, if I gave you the equation 4x minus 3y equals 9, and I asked you to write that in slope-intercept form, I am asking you to solve for y. Okay, so let's do that. First thing we would have to do is move the 4x to the other side of the equation. Since it's a positive 4x, we're going to move it with subtraction. That's going to leave us with -3y. Now, I like to write the minus 4x first and the plus 9 second, so that it looks more like y equals mx plus b. Your y is still not alone, so you're going to have to divide every term in the problem by a -3. So y equals, now two negatives, -4 divided by -3 is going to turn out to be a positive 4/3 x. Positive 9 divided by -3 is going to turn into be a -3. So you are now in slope-intercept form. Your slope in this problem is 4. Your y-intercept in this problem is -3. Okay, so now that we have that, we have the ability to graph it. So I'm going to make my graph a little bigger. Okay, so when we go to graph this, the very first thing we want to plot is our y-intercept. Okay, and the numbers get a little off here at the bottom. So here's -1, -2, -3 is actually right here. Okay, so I plotted my y-intercept. Now I'm going to use my slope. So from -3, I'm going to rise 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to run 1, 2, 3 spaces, and I'm going to put another dot. I can continue to do that if I want. Up, 1, 2, 3, 4, over 1, 2, 3, dot. Graph a line between those points, and you have officially sketched the graph. Other times they'll have you go backwards where they will show you 2 points on the graph and they'll ask you what the equation of the line is. You want the equation of your line to look like y equals mx plus b. Finding the b is actually the easiest thing. The b is just where you cross the y-axis. So in this problem, since the graph crosses the y-axis at 3, I can put a plus 3 at the end of the equation. In order to find my slope, I'm going to use the rise over the run. Now start with the point that's on the left and work your way to the point that's on the right. In order to make it from the left to the right, I have to go down 3 units and right 2 units. That means my slope is going to be negative 3 over 2. Don't forget your x. So your equation is y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 3. Horizontal and vertical lines can be a little bit tricky, so I would put them in your notebook so that you don't get stumped by them. For example, if I asked you to graph the line y equals 2, that is actually going to be a horizontal line. And that's because every point in this horizontal plane has a y value of 2. For example, this is the point 0, 2, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5, 2, 6, 2, 7, 2, 8, 2, 9. Notice everything in that horizontal line has a y value of 0. So y is going to look like a horizontal line. X equals negative 3 is going to look like a vertical line. Okay, we could use the same logic if we want to. If we go to where x is negative 3, this is the point negative 3, 0, negative 3, 1, negative 3, 2, negative 3, 3, negative 3, 4. Everything in this vertical line has an x value of negative 3. So that is going to produce a vertical line. If they asked you about the slopes of the horizontal line is 0, the slope of the vertical line is undefined. Last but not least, they're going to ask you briefly about dependent versus independent. In general, your x values are going to be considered your independent variables, and your y values are going to be considered your dependent variables. So when they ask you what your independent variable is x, your dependent variable is y. Okay, that's a brief overview of graphing. That's a lot of information. The best way to learn is to get some practice. Let me know if you have questions.